On this episode of the Master Instructor Roundtable, myself, Marty Miller, here with my co-host, Wendy Batts, we are covering an amazing topic, BFR, blood flow restriction, with Dr. Warren Bradley, who's an expert in the area and co-founder of Hytro. So, Wendy, what are they going to catch on this episode?
We talk a lot about actually what BFR is, so blood flow restriction, how you can best use it with your elderly clients, your fitness enthusiasts, as well as your professional athletes. He goes into some incredible, easy to understand, so digestible science, and then just gives you some ideas and protocols that you can use with your clients if you're interested. Guys, you have to watch this episode. It is so good. So we hope you enjoy the show, and also be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and download, and give us a 5 out of 5 rating. Enjoy.
Hello, and welcome back to the NASM Master Instructor Roundtable. I'm Marty Miller, here with my co-host, Wendy Batts. And today, we're diving into one of the most innovative and fast advancing performance tools in our field, blood flow restriction, or BFR. And to help us unpack the science and application and future BFR, we're going to be joined by a very special guest, Dr. Warren Bradley, the founder and chief science officer of Hytro. Wendy, I know you and I have been playing around with BFR and we're excited. So how's everything over there in Atlanta?
Everything is great. It's very good. So weather's perfect. We've got a great guest today. Get to hang out with you, Marty. It's going to be a good show.
Perfect. So why don't we bring Dr. Warren Bradley in? And Wendy, I'll let you kick it off.
Hey, Warren, how are you?
Hey, guys. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
Well, thank you for being here, because we know in your world it is a little bit later than it is in ours. But Dr. Warren, why don't you, before we even get started, can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself, a little bit about Hytro, because we're going to be talking about that, which is your company. So just so everyone's on the same page from the start, can you just give us a little bit of a background about you and the company itself?
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. Thank you. So for my part, I worked in professional sports for just over a decade. I worked in the Premier League for several years in soccer, as we call it over here in the UK, international rugby, worked at the Olympics, and I was a sports scientist by practice. But I simultaneously also completed a PhD in exercise physiology and nutrition, and published many journals and book chapters in that area too. And what happened essentially was I came across the technique of blood flow restriction. And I used a lot of it for rehabbing my athletes in a squad setting, but it's very complex and cumbersome. So long story short, I patented a new way to deploy blood flow restriction to make it accessible for any athlete or any client in any situation or environment to get the benefits of blood flow restriction. And we now work with over 400 professional teams, including some of the biggest athletes on the planet. So pretty fortunate position to be in.
No, thanks for that background. So I'm going to have you dive a little deeper, and maybe if you can tell us how many years ago that was, but you hinted about what the original insight or problem was and why you went on to create a different product, and if you could talk about your background with that. And then, also I'll kind of combine in there, what were some of the barriers that as you were trying to use BFR, like with your athletes, was there just the usage, was there safety issues? So if you can kind of go over those things, I think that'd be a great way to start the conversation.
Yeah, sure thing. So when I used to use blood flow restriction, the devices were pneumatic cuffs. So cuffs that would be either wired to a complex machine, a digital machine, or a pneumatic handheld sphygmometer that would pump up the pressure, or some kind of Bluetooth device. So very effective devices, but very complex and cumbersome. And because of this, you had to supervise its use. So if I had an athlete doing rehab, I had to be there watching them, setting the pressure, watching them go through their exercise, etc. So it was too complex to scale. And I just thought, well, what if we could apply this to a whole squad of athletes and use it slightly differently and actually use it to enhance exercise and performance adaptations? So grow muscle quicker, increase strength, speed, power, endurance, VO2 max, recovery even. BFR was known to do those things. There was 10,000 research papers in the area, but no one had yet bridged the gap with a product to allow people to access those amazing benefits. And that's really what set the kind of cogs in motion for me to conceive of a way to bridge that gap and create a more practical and accessible device. And that was, gosh, so you asked for a timeline. I must have conceived of this about 10 years ago, applied for the patent about 8. And we built Hytro together with my co-founders about 6 years ago. Started selling to the market, particularly the US, only 2 years ago. And we've really rapidly grown in the US market, which is incredible.
That's awesome. So Warren, can you explain, because again, for those of us that are new to blood flow restriction, I mean, Marty and I obviously have played around with it for years, but for our listeners that are new to BFR, can you explain a little bit more about the psychological mechanisms and what's actually happening in the muscles when we keep saying restrict blood flow? That sounds like not a good thing.
It sounds scary, right? But there's thousands of research studies showing it's safe and effective, and it's actually been around for many, many decades and used very safely. So if people are watching, you'll be able to see me actually deploy it and apply a blood flow restriction right now. So you'll see here, there's a strapping mechanism that I'm going to pull, and I'm going to apply it round my limb. So the arm in this situation for those who are listening. And what's happening right now is blood is going into my limb, but the return flow back to the body is restricted by this strapping tourniquet mechanism. And you'll start to see I'll get a bit more vascular, slightly change in color, and that's because blood is now pooling in that tissue. So my muscle tissues are now filling with blood, they're becoming deoxygenated, and therefore they're becoming stressed. So the muscles are actually experiencing simulated exercise. So when we exercise, we're creating an inflow of blood, we're creating swelling, we're creating metabolite buildup. It's happening now without me doing any movement. So what it therefore goes on to do is magnify anything I choose to do thereafter. So right now this is passive. This is really good for recovery. When I release, I'll get a flush and fresh blood dragged in. But the cool part really for training is when you add low intensity resistance exercise or low intensity endurance exercise, because what it will do is magnify the output. So say you go for a walk and do blood flow restriction in your legs will experience almost sprinting mechanics physiologically. If you do push-ups with your arms occluded, your tissues will think you're bench pressing a heavy weight. And again, another example, if you do body weight squats with your legs occluded, you will experience in your tissues like you're lifting a heavy barbell back squat. So what this means is incredibly beneficial for people rehabbing, people who can't lift heavy loads, perhaps elderly or just load compromised, or for those who are at a plateau in their training who want to get, through a bench press PR or a squat PR that they're just kind of plateauing at. This will help you get there.
Very interesting. And I have been using it. So I'm going to ask you a question, but then I'll have a quick follow-up so that way Wendy knows it's coming. How does BFR stimulate muscle hypertrophy and strength differently? Can you go a little more into the science than from traditional loading strategies?
Yeah, so there's a lot of literature showing that blood flow restriction with light weights and low intensities has a similar effect as lifting heavy weights, but with much lower loads. And the reason this process happens is, permit me to go slightly into a bit of science here. So when the blood enters the tissue and it swells the tissues, we are stressing the tissues internally. We're creating a stressful environment. And much like when you lift a heavy weight, stress equals adaptation. So we're just adding an additional stressor that triggers muscle protein synthesis in the tissue, which is the central regulatory pathway for muscle growth and muscle turnover. At the same time, we're doing a few other things. So we're increasing fiber 2, type 2 fiber recruitment. Because there's a lack of oxygen now in that tissue, it's become hypoxic. Type 1 fibers require oxygen to create energy in glycolysis. But a type 2 fiber does not, it's glycolytic. So now the muscles say, well, hang on a second, where is all the oxygen gone? I'm feeling really stressed and I need some oxygen. So what it does is it kicks in additional fiber types to help it lift a weight. So you can train more fiber or recruit more fibers using light weights and grow muscle tissue very, very quickly because of this. And that's why it's an incredible rehab tool, and that's where it came from.
No, that's fascinating. I know we're going to get more into training protocols, but my experience, and whenever I try something new, right, I go to, trying to unpack it, learn the science, learn from professionals like yourself. And when I do new forms of exercise, I start simple. But But is it possible after 3 to 4 workouts, I believe I'm not a placebo effect kind of guy, but I actually felt better in my performance, which kind of made me like, ooh, how much should I push? Like, have you heard that people that use the blood flow restriction, they actually feel more energized or even a better workout?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of peripheral things or proxy things that happen with BFR. It's not just tissue related. So you will get a dump of dopamine into the bloodstream. You'll get growth hormone secretions. You'll get, like you said, you feel more energized. That is a hormonal reaction to the stresses of BFR. Because when you release that stress, if you think about all of that pressure that's built up in the tissue and all of that lactate and metabolite accumulation, that's incredibly stressful. When you release, it's like blowing up a balloon and letting it go really quickly. You get a powerful ejection, and that's going to flush those tissues while driving fresh nutrient-rich blood back into those tissues, while dumping hormones into the blood, which go around the body systemically, right? The blood flow goes everywhere. It's the brain, it's the tissues, it's trabecular bone. So yeah, you're absolutely spot on. You do get additional benefits off the back of BFR that are not just training related. And we use it for reaction time. We use this in, Formula One drivers use our products to improve reaction time before they get in the car. So it's not just tissue.
Well, I'm gonna say if you're working with Lando, you got to make sure he's ready. So we're big fans over here. So anyway,
okay.
I know we're big F1 fans here. So I guess my question. I'm sorry, it's not even something that we've discussed, but I listened to you when we actually had our meeting, and I was fascinated with what you guys are doing with BFR and recovery. So, you were just talking about the release and the flow, but we don't usually talk about BFR in that type of avenue. So can you go down kind of the pathway to let people know that if you are going to do this BFR, it's not about, like you said, it's not about just growing size and getting stronger, but how you use it on a recovery standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a brilliant question. And originally, when I started using BFR in a team setting, it was all about rehabbing and regenerating tissue and hypertrophy, essentially. But the more you think about the science and the underpinning mechanisms at play, it makes total sense that it's an incredibly powerful recovery tool. So let's look at the science and what's happening when you do BFR for recovery. So like I did before, you would strap in the limb, blood would flow into that tissue, the tissue would swell, you would get recovery hormones dumped into the blood because it's getting stressed. And then when it's engorged fully and it's got to its peak swell, when you release, it's like letting go of that balloon. You're going to flush away metabolites, waste materials, hydrogen ions, free radicals, lactate. That all gets shunted out of the tissue very powerfully. And there's nothing, for the record, that can do it as powerfully as BFR. You may have recovery boots or massage guns that I guess they're more superficial. They will work on the externals of the tissue, which help move lymph, which are really great, and you feel good. But BFR goes to the deep tissue. The words lost on me. But it gets to the deep tissue, and essentially you start to recover from the deep tissues out. So we've released, we've flushed, and then we get something called reactive hyperemia, which is really cool. That's fresh blood being forced back into the limbs that's carrying oxygen, that may be carrying glucose and amino acids if you've had a recovery shake or some food. And it also enhances the transportation of those nutrients into the tissues by enhancing the GLUT4 transporters. So there's a lot of deep science to it, but essentially swelling, flushing, and reperfusing the tissues are going to help clear metabolites and fresh blood thrown back in. So really, really good for recovery.
So to piggyback off of that, I'm sorry, Marty, I just if anyone's listening to this, what would be the time frame? Like how long would you, would you go back and forth like every other minute, 2 minutes? Is it?
Yeah, so there's good literature on different protocols. So there isn't actually a gold standard at this point in time, but we've, I guess, amalgamated the literature and come up with what we believe to be the best protocol, which is 5 minutes of occlusion with the products, 2 minutes unstrapped for the flush, the reperfusion to occur, times 3 rounds. Now, we do a lot of research, so we have publications, we have many going in for peer review right now and many underway with professional teams and lab facilities. And we've just had a study come back which we believe to show that the intermittent application of BFR is really important for recovery. So you could do recovery BFR for 15 minutes by just strapping in and staying strapped in for 15 minutes continuously. But in this study, they split it into 3 rounds with the breaks for the reperfusion, and it had a far greater impact on neuromuscular recovery, so on the improvement in performance markers. Not just subjective, we saw definitive performance improvements in bar velocity on a squat, on a hip thrust, and on a CMJ jump height. So 3 lots of 5 minutes with 3 breaks is really, really important for recovery.
That's awesome.
Now, we appreciate that. And if you can forward us any key literature you want us to put in show notes, et cetera, because we do have a lot of passionate people that would like to dive into that research. We will make sure that people get their hands on it. Love to read some of your work. So when you went to recovery, I'm going to go back to the bro gym science. So let's talk about BFR in a typical strength session and maybe warm-ups, hypertrophy block of training, or can you use it, I'm assuming, in metabolic finishers, power, and what are some of those type of protocols? How would people know how to ease into it, or what their protocol should be?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there because we can go down all 4 of those routes in detail.
Right.
Let's start with the priming. So pre-activation with BFR. This is becoming really, really commonplace in professional sports because what we're seeing in the scientific literature is a performance advantage from doing BFR within your existing warm-up. So say you do a mobility drill or stretching, mobilizing, movement flow, and you add BFR to that. Because of that flush and that reperfusion that we just talked about, we're driving additional blood into tissues, warming them more effectively, and we get something called hypoalgesia, which is essentially pain relief. It triggers the endocannabinoid system. And with that, we have a lot of clients or athletes who have tendinopathies, knee pain, joint pain in general. So if you do BFR as a warm-up or within your existing warm-up, you'll warm tissues better, you'll reduce pain, and you'll improve range of motion going into that session. So warming up with BFR is one of my favorite ways to do it because you see a definitive impact straight away and you will feel it. Now, digging into the training side of things, I would prescribe BFR definitely for people who are load compromised, who can't lift heavy and want, a physiological challenge. So that could be post-rehab or during rehab or post-surgery, or perhaps for an elderly client, or perhaps for a veteran athlete who has lifted heavy all their lives and there's just a war of attrition on their joints. They just need to get stimulus in without load. So that would be something I prescribe BFR only lifting for. So we're not damaging joints with a lot of load. And that protocol would be, you've probably heard of the 30-15-15-15 protocol, which is essentially 30 repetitions followed by 30 seconds rest, followed by 3 sets of 15 repetitions, each with 30 seconds rest in between. Now, there are different ways to do that. As long as you do around 75 to 80 repetitions in a short period of time, you're going to get the same output, but that is the most commonly tested protocol. So you might pick an air squat, so body weight squat. You might pick a hip thrust, and you might pick some calf raises if you're doing lower body dominant session. 3 or 4 exercises with that rep range with those sets, all occluded. After each exercise, you would unocclude, deflate the cuff, unstrap the mechanism, whatever the device is, take 2 minutes rest, complete rest, then strap back in and do the next set of exercises for 4 sets. So that session takes you about 20 minutes and you will get adaptations like you've lifted for an hour in the gym because you've challenged the muscles so much. I just want to give you a bit of an anecdote on that because it's quite important to understand. If you've lifted heavy in the gym for an hour, imagine the experience or the feelings you've experienced over that hour. Now take BFR for 20 minutes. You're going to experience all of that 1 hour of discomfort, let's say, in 20 minutes. That's BFR. It's an accelerant, an accelerator. You will feel it all in a shorter space of time, but you will get a strong adaptation because of it.
Great.
So Warren, before I want to ask you the next question, but before I do, I want to say that this episode of the Master Instructor Roundtable is brought to you by NASM1, the membership for trainers and coaches. Members enjoy unlimited access to hundreds of career resources, get the Edge app to schedule and program clients, enjoy half off all certifications and specializations, access free CUs, and more. All of this for $35 a month. Go to nasm.org/membership to learn more about NASM 1. So, Warren, are there certain populations that you consider ideal for BFR, such as older adults, athletes? You kind of mentioned that, but then on the flip side, what are the contraindications, or who are the people that should not do it?
Yeah, so BFR is for anyone really, but not for everyone. So what I mean by that is there's possible application for anyone to get the benefit from BFR, but because of the discomfort that I explained, not everyone wants to do it. So realistically, we're going to start looking at cohorts of people that definitively require a stimulus without loads. That's elderly populations, load compromised people post-surgery or rehabs. It's going to be veteran athletes, like you said before. And the contraindications there would be very similar to normal exercise. So although it sounds like, oh, we're restricting blood flow, that sounds scary, there's actually no additional contraindications other than bleeding if there's an open wound, because obviously creating pressure will cause a bleed, and any severe hypertensive kind of history patterns. But that is the same for exercise. If you have severe hypertension, you should be checking with the GP anyway. So contraindications wise, it's very well established as a safe and effective science. But really, we even talk about having teenagers using BFR because they have growing pains like Osgood-Schlatter's in the knees. So this is a really good way to allow them to train with lower loads and not load the joints, which is actually more dangerous than using the BFR. I mean, we work with astronauts in space with NASA. We work across the whole spectrum of elderly, in medical, in wellness, professional athletes. Anyone can really do this, providing they're not contraindicated.
No, this is exciting. I'm eager to do more of the research. Like I said, I've been using the product for 2 weeks now, and I'm really enjoying it. So there's, so many different types of questions I have, but, one of the things that, I'd like to kind of dive deeper into is, that stimulus efficiency that, I know that is a phrase out there, getting that higher training effect with less load. So do you cut down the volume and the load per set, or like, how do you recommend for someone like myself that's been doing strength training my entire life? Like, is there a way, because again, I'm used to doing, a strength phase, maybe 8 to 12 reps. So now I'm looking at 30. So if you can maybe guide us through that training protocol, I think that would be great for our audience.
Yeah, sure. So the volume would typically be slightly higher because we need to use lighter weights and take your muscles to volitional fatigue. And that's why we use the 75 rep protocol. But so long as you're taking the muscle to volitional fatigue, we've achieved the goal, because we're taking it to where it can't go any further. And that the aim is to get to 75. We don't expect everyone to get there. And that is also why we split it into different sets. So you might only get to rep 10 on set 2 or rep 8 on set 3. That just indicates you need to drop the weight even further. And to be honest, it's incredibly humbling. So I would do, let's say I can do 10 reps with a 16 kilo dumbbell bicep. With this, I'd do 5 kilo, and it would be incredibly hard. It would feel like I'm doing 16s. It's a really unusual feeling, because at the beginning it feels easy because it is light. But as that swelling occurs, as that lactate builds up, as that accumulative swelling happens, you hit a brick wall. It's actually very strange feeling. And because it's a novel stimulus for anyone who's never done it before, your adaptations are incredibly quick. So even if you're an elite level lifter or an elite athlete, you will adapt very, very quickly because it's novel, which is obviously a very well-known scientific principle in the body, right? If you've not run for a while and you go for a run, you'll adapt quite quickly. So there's a bench press study in powerlifters who were plateauing, and they were benching something like 220 kilos. They couldn't get through their plateau. They added BFR for a few weeks, and all of a sudden they were adding 5 to 6% to their bench press, which is crazy, really, when you think about it. But it's because of the novelty of the stimulus for the tissue.
So let me ask you this. I actually have the Hytro shirt and shorts, and went on a bike ride for 20 minutes. And when you said legitimately that you hit a wall, I thought my leg was going to explode because I had never done that before. I had always just done it for shorter increments, really just doing exercises, not doing something such as biking or running or walking. So you were kind of hitting on it, but I think it's important for people that are really trying to understand blood flow restriction. You keep saying it's an uncomfortable feeling. Like, how does the inclusion work? How do you know if it's too much, if it's not enough? Like what, you know, with your product, it's amazing because you can just pull it. But like, how do you know if it's too much?
Yeah, so we did years and years of R&D to build the products so that you cannot overexert the pressure. So we've got products from sizes extra small all the way through to 4 extra large, and clearly the mechanism grades as the sizes go up, which means the pressure is graduated nicely through the curve. And we've built them specifically so that no individual on the planet can occlude their artery. And we have done the research behind this and validated it. So we call it pre-calibrated pressure. So if you were to use a tourniquet without any pressure validation or an understanding of what you're applying, you're completely right. You could overexert, and that would be dangerous because we're cutting off blood supply entirely. But what we've achieved here is we're only cutting off the venous return and only partially cutting off the arterial flow to a certain percentage that's known for our product. So you can't overexert it. Even if it feels really uncomfortable, it's not unsafe. That said, the tolerance is a big part in BFR. So I've worked with athletes before, and they've told me to go away and never give me that again because it was very uncomfortable, and they were put off immediately. And this was earlier in my career when I didn't know how to apply BFR properly. So what we have is 2 different pressure settings on the shorts and 4 on the t-shirt, so that you can transition through those settings and get used to it and become accustomed to that feeling, which is super important because it is so unusual when you first try it.
Yes.
Thank you for that, Wendy. Great question, because I was going to ask the exact same thing.
Well, I mean, I blew it up as fast and as hard as it will go. So I'm like, oh, it's going to go to this number. I'm going to check it out. And literally hit 20 minutes and thought, oh my God, my legs may fall off. So it was great.
The bike is my favorite way to use it. Stationary bike, mind you. But
I did that today.
Yeah, me too.
It's gnarly, isn't it? It's
good.
Probably the most potent physiological benefit you'll get from BFR, because when you're on a continuous locomotive exercise, what you get, there's no rest periods, right? You're just continually contracting fibers. And because everything's trapped in the tissue, you get such a big buildup of lactate. You saturate the tissue with lactate, you can't get any more in. And then it's locked. So your tissues are basically screaming, burning at you for the whole duration of that exercise. And if you think about what that's doing, that's a signal to adapt, but a really powerful one because it's continuous. So all you need to do at that point is grin and bear it and just get all the gains, essentially. But there's 2 really cool things that happen on top of that for endurance athletes. So if you're like a runner, cyclist, triathlete or something, when we lock deoxygenated blood in that tissue, everything becomes hypoxic. And then the tissues say, where's all the oxygen gone? How do I get more in here so I can contract better? So what the muscles do is they extend their capillaries. So you get something called capillarization, so increased blood vessel networks in the tissue. You also get mitochondrial biogenesis, which are the little cells that take sugar and oxygen, bash them together and create energy, ATP. So if you've now got a better network of blood vessels carrying more oxygen and glucose into the tissue when you're unoccluded, and you now have more factories to smash it all together and create energy, you are basically more energy efficient and fitter. And all you needed to do is 15 minutes of BFR on a bike to achieve that. It's honestly incredible when you look at the physiology.
Fabulous, right? Let's be efficient in life. I love it. So, Dr. Warren, I could go on for hours, and I'm going to be pinging you as I continue to use this with protocols and this, that, the other. And I know now I'm traveling with it with a trip coming up. I'm not going to be without it. But what's next for Hytro? Are there developments, research collaborations, new integrations? Like, is there anything that you could like kind of leave with our listeners to, we want them to check you out, and we'll ask you here in a few minutes on where they can find you, but anything you can leave us with, like maybe what's next?
Yeah, sure. I'll give a few snippets. So we're doing a lot of research, so you should expect to see a lot of publications coming out using Hytro BFR for recovery, for training, for muscle growth, strength, speed, power, endurance, using it for warming up effectively. We're doing research with, I need to be careful, NDAs. So with physiology tracker companies, let's say, I didn't say who it was. We're working with NASA and SpaceX. We should be hopefully on another mission with them, our third mission to space. All research missions, which basically dictate the product. So we learn stuff in space, we make the product better, we take it to our athletes, they test it, and now soon we'll be going full blown to the consumer market. Right now, the focus is business to business with professional athletes and teams, but people can self-serve on the website, and that will become much bigger over the next 2 to 3 years. So expect to see more of us on your socials.
I love it. So I guess my final question that I have is for our listeners. You've talked about so much great information, especially giving us a clearer picture of blood flow restriction, how we can use it throughout all different types of areas in our workout. But if you had to give us like some key takeaways, what would you like to leave with?
Oh, wow. Open platform.
On the spot.
Yeah, I guess for the demographic listening to this podcast heavily into training, I would say the addition to your existing training program, BFR, is a no-brainer. So adding it as a finisher to the end of your session will augment everything you did previously. So if you've lifted heavy, just doing some BFR squats, body weight squats, is going to spike muscle protein synthesis and really make the most of the damage you've done in your session. So you're going to get better quicker. For trainers, I would advise this. If there's more professional athlete or kind of athlete-based individuals, the recovery side of BFR is incredibly powerful. And if you're after a competition, highly advise you do BFR 3 lots of 5 minutes for a walk, even just to get you back to baseline much, much quicker. Yeah, so there's a couple of, I guess, key takeaways for 2 different markets.
I love it.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Warren, I know that you've gotten us intrigued. And like I said, we're big fans of the product, and I highly recommend all of our listeners to check out the topic, right? Because it's coming. You know, you want to get ahead of the newest science because your clients are going to be asking, or you want to give them the best opportunities to excel in their training. So, Dr. Warren, before we go and close out, can you tell people where they can find you or your company, or what the best area, for them to check you out on Instagram, social media, website, etc., please?
Yeah, sure. So the website is hytro.com. We're on LinkedIn, Hytro, Instagram, Hytro again. And my own socials are Dr. Warren Bradley or Dr. Warren Bradley on both socials. Actually, it's quite self-explanatory, quite nice and easy.
There we go. Awesome. Well, we know you have some important things to attend to over there in England. I know it's late and you got some big family things going on. So we're going to let you get to it, but we can't thank you enough. And I have a feeling we're going to get pinged with a lot of questions, and we're probably going to be calling you back up in a few months to do another round of this.
I'd be only delighted to speak to you guys again. So just let me know.
Awesome, Dr. Warren. Thank you so much, my friend.
Awesome, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Wendy, I'm glad we did this for many reasons. This was on my bucket list to dig more into the science, and I know we're going to be getting some research posted in the show notes from Dr. Bradley, and I know I learned a lot.
Oh, I did too. And I also feel better knowing that when I was on the bike and thought I was going to die, that I was doing it right, because I'm like, this could not be this hard. Marty, it was barely on any level, and I'm like used to trying to crush it and stand and sit and do all of that. No, I was sitting and praying it like the time was going to go.
There you go. Well, hey,
like I loved every minute of it, by the way.
More intense. So for those of you that join us, we always thank you. Wendy, if you want to give these great people the ability to contact you, how would they do that?
Sure. You guys can find me, as always, on Instagram at wendy.batts13, or you can email me at wendy.batts@nasm.org.
And my information is right here, dr.martymiller72, and email marty.miller@nasm.org. So once again, thank you all for watching this episode. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Master Instructor Roundtable. Please be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and give us that great 5-star review. We appreciate it, and we'll see you soon.